Hello everyone, it's time for Good Week Israel, where we'll give you ILTV's latest positive highlights. Today though, we have a special show dedicated to combating the conflict, addressing misinformation and the rise in anti-Semitism. ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh sat in the studio with a panel of some of today's most influential Israeli and anti-Semitism activists and experts. Take a look.
I'm Emmanuel Kadosh, and joining me today in the studio are Chen Mazig, op-ed writer and senior fellow at the Tel Aviv Institute, and Rudy Rockman, Jewish Israel rights activist. Now on Zoom, we have the founder of the Jewish Fashion Council and Me for We Project, Adi Chaiman, Israel advocate and influencer Moti Ankari, and high-tech partnerships manager and social media influencer Shir Ibgi. Moti and Adi are both joining us from New York. Shir lives here in Israel, and of course, Rudy and Chen are here in our studios in Tel Aviv. Now, let's get into it. Over the last 2 weeks, month, the intense social media exposure over the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been taken to new heights, with people from all over the world voicing their opinions on the issue, as well as constantly sharing or resharing relevant articles and posts. All of this, in turn, has caused an uproar of anti-Semitic attacks against Jews all over the globe, including verbal and physical attacks in Europe, North America, and the Middle East since the escalation between Israel and Gaza heated up earlier this month. Now, I wanted to unpack this a little bit and hear from each one of our guests their opinions on the matter. Guys, thank you so much for joining me, and of course, everyone on Zoom. Let's just even the playing field a little bit. Not all of us are as super well-versed as you guys on the conflict, on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. People who have been sharing their opinion on social media aren't as well-versed as we would like, and we've seen that become and cause a very big issue. So I kind of just want you guys to take this as more of like an opportunity to educate, share your opinion, share with us, facts and how you guys are feeling about everything that's been going on. So we're going to start with you, Rudy. We have a few questions, both from the people that are viewers and avid ILTV followers, and of course, ourselves. So let's start things off by talking about how social media has had a direct impact on how people across the world saw this specific escalation between Israel and Gaza unfold, and what do you think about that?
Sure, so social media is a tool. It could be used for the good, it could be used for the bad. It's a tool to disseminate information. A lot of Jews, a lot of people that are pro-Israel are very surprised to the fact that there's so much out there against Israel, against the Jewish people, but it's something that a lot of activists that have been doing this for a long time, I've realized that this is what the society is at right now. And social media is just a representation or a mirror into what the society truly looks like. Now, there are two problems: the role of the people that aren't part of this land, that are not Palestinian, that are not Israeli, and also the role of the people of this land. And if you're outside of this land, meaning you're someone that's pro-Palestinian or pro-Israel, it's your responsibility to use in whatever measures that you can, whether in social media or in your activism or in any energy, to use that to bring people together. There's no reality where Palestinians disappear. There's no realities where Israelis disappear. And all these narratives being pushed on social media is always this side is correct and this side is wrong. This side is the oppressor and this side is the oppressed. These are the people that we should be supporting and these are the people we should be against. But the reality is, if we keep pushing that narrative, you're only going to be destructive to both sides, because neither are going to disappear. So we have to talk about the suffering that is going on. We have to change the structure, because clearly there's something that's wrong that's happening here. But the role that they're playing is pushing these zero-sum game narratives. And who's really profiting from this? It's definitely not the Israeli people.
Right.
It's definitely not the Palestinian people. So who's profiting? If not the media companies, weapon industries, or even politicians that are using this to get political gain within their following, or not to have elections on the Palestinian Authority side. So we have to ask ourselves, who's really profiting and why this is happening? Not just the what, but the why. And that's something that a lot of people miss. Now, in terms of the Jewish community, we have to realize that this has been going on for over 15 years.
Right.
Movement on campuses, intellectual spaces, trying to get the next generation's political and intellectual class to hate the Jewish people and to see Israel as the representation of everything bad in the world. And you see this from the left to the right. The right usually blames the Jewish people for the source of the problem of a society. So blame coronavirus on the Jews, blame the Black Plague on the Jews, blame the economic situation post-World War I in Germany on the Jews. But the left does something a little bit different. They take what their society is ashamed of, so white supremacy, apartheid, genocide, slavery, colonialism, and they blame those elements that they feel ashamed of their ancestors onto the Jews. And you see those same words being applied to the Jews. And the reality is that, one, we're not foreigners. We come from this land. You dig in the land, you find our history. And yes, there's a conflict where both the Jewish leaders and the Palestinian leaders got it wrong, and they didn't come together, and they fought in the war, and they were manipulated, of course, by other powers. But now when you have come to a point where we need to have conversations of moving forward, and the Jewish people need to realize that this problem is only going to get worse if we don't rise up, if we don't start taking our control over our narrative. You wouldn't want to hear about black rights from KKK members. You wouldn't want to hear about women rights from misogynists. So why, when you go to college campuses or intellectual spaces, the only people people generating the conversation about Israel and the Jewish people are those that are against us.
What's interesting, we were talking about this obviously with both of us here in the studio, less so with the Zoom members, but this isn't a new topic. Just because it's, being a little bit more, a lot more exposed on social media, it doesn't mean that it's a new topic. It might be a new topic to a few people who have seen it being exposed on social media, but how do you see, you were saying that social media is a tool, but how do you see that it's been impacting people negatively? How does it impact Israel negatively in the last 2 weeks?
I mean, the numbers of the people that are spreading this misinformation and the lies about Israel and about the Jewish people are huge. I mean, we mentioned two supermodels, Bella Hadid and Gigi Hadid, which, I don't know, we will discuss it later, but I don't think that they should be our target because they're supermodels and they're not thought leaders in any way. We'll discuss it later, but they do have millions of followers. They have more followers than Jews alive in the world. We have, 14 million Jews, and just one of them has 44 million. So I think that the problem is that really those people are spreading a lot of misinformation, and someone told me that I'm gatekeeping on the conversation when I'm saying that people that are not experts shouldn't take such a stand. And I stand behind it because I do think that there should be some sort of gatekeeping. People that until 2 weeks ago did not know how to say Sheikh Jarrah or how to pronounce names of villages, that now they're talking about them as if they're experts and claiming that there is ethnic cleansing and talking about colonialism and imperialism without knowing that, understanding the meaning of those words. Or I was doing a live stream with one of the drag queens from RuPaul Drag Race yesterday, Alexis Michelle, and Alex told me that he feels that he's so uneducated about it, and we, I found that there was a lot of misunderstanding, and that once they are open up to having those conversations and researching more, that it will be much better. And I think I was telling Rudy when we came on the elevator that I used to write op-eds. My op-eds were in LA Times, in NBC News, everywhere. Now I'm focusing more on making infographics on Instagram. And I know it's ridiculous. I've never thought that this would get me more of a reach and people will really listen to what I have to say. But, Deborah Messing is sharing my messages. People that are with high profile are sharing my content now, but it's just infographics. When I wrote articles, people did not even listen to them.
Now, I want to ask Moti, what do you feel has been the biggest misinformation that has been circling around that you would like to either set straight or kind of talk about? I know that you are coming to us from New York, and you guys are kind of getting like a different outlook on things. So talk to me.
I think there's a lot of misinformation right now, just people not contextualizing the whole situation. So people are saying, like, for example, people think that Israel attacked the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Right. They don't understand that there was rioters. They don't understand that there were people, provoking the soldiers. They think that Israel just woke up one morning and they were bored and they decided to go into the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Like, that's what genuinely people think. Right. That's the crazy part. Like, people that I'm friends with, people that I follow, peers, colleagues, like, that's what they think. So I did a live with Rudy actually the other day, and I think just debunking the timeline and just explaining to people what actually happened and how it happened and what led to it was really important. There's just at this point, so much has happened in 2 weeks. It feels like I'm going to need to do like 15 lives just to get through everything. It's difficult because even after you tell and explain to people, they're still convinced. They don't want their minds to change, which is very, very scary.
Well, I think a lot of people are very set in their ways, and obviously each person believes that they know the most and they know the correct information and they have the best opinion. And now with social media, they share their information or what they believe is right and run with it, and they don't realize how many people are following them, how many people are influenced by that. And speaking of influence, let's talk a little bit about social media influencers and celebrities sharing their opinions and taking sides on the matter. Shir, how do you feel about this, and how do you think that that's impacted people around the world?
I mean, personally, like, I've been sharing, just facts and numbers. And again, I think it's great that Chen is starting to create infographics because that's how people like to read information very quickly. We'll post, the truth. And even though it's a really long article, they'll read the first few sentences and then reshare it. But I'm sure that many people that saw, let's say, Bella Hadid's infographic, I'm sure they just read the first slide and then just reshared it as well and didn't read the entire thing. And that's something that, we're seeing happening a lot. And that's really, spreading the misinformation because people are click happy. That's what I like to call it, right? They see something quickly and they share it. Now, for me personally, when I go ahead and, take that stance and share everything that I'm experiencing here in Tel Aviv, I shared, the multiple times I had to run into the bomb shelter. I shared multiple times seeing rockets from my balcony and the Iron Dome, destroying it midair. I had so many friends and followers reach out to me. Wow, I can't believe, you're sharing this. This is not what I'm seeing at all. I had no idea rockets were even reaching Tel Aviv. I had no idea that this was happening. I can't put, just people were sending me messages as if this was the first time they were seeing the information I was sharing. And that was a scary.
That's, sorry to cut you off, but that's so interesting that you say that, because so many people who are following, Shir and I happen to have very similar followers, because we're both, Americans here living in Israel. And a lot of people are like, wow, that's so not what we're getting from America. That's not what we're hearing on the news. That's not what we're seeing on social media. Like, we're living in, New York, Miami, wherever it is, and we're not seeing what you guys are experiencing on the day-to-day. And like, tell me about your experience living here in Israel, but also trying to cater to your followers in America and trying to explain to them your experience.
I mean, it's been hard. I get a lot of messages that are not so nice.
Yeah.
And I do my best to just share the facts and share what I'm experiencing. Because at the end of the day, if someone has a stance and they're not open to hearing, the truth and what your side is and whatever it may be, then there's not much more you can do. And for me, I've been really grateful that I've had the followers that did reach out to me saying, can you explain to me what's happening at Sheikh Jarrah? Can you explain to me what this means? Because I don't really know, and you're actually there, and I would like to hear your opinion. And that's what the most heartwarming thing for me, because just to change one person's mind, and to just share your side with one person is the biggest difference. And that's really been the thing that's been keeping me going in the past few weeks.
Adi, I want to ask you to talk a little bit about how you deal with the media, engaging both with people online and in the streets. You're coming to us from New York. Is there, a lot of people have been saying, like, is there even a point to be sharing our opinion or to be sharing these, articles and infographics and all these things? Have you had success in changing the minds of, your followers?
Well, sorry. I think for my following who follow me, they probably have created for themselves this type of echo chamber of social media accounts they follow. So I feel like a huge problem in this sharing of information and having impact and reach is that the people seeing all the, pro-Israel information, anti-Palestine, whatever it is, you typically create your own space, and it kind of reiterates your values, reiterates your views, and therefore eliminates any type of outside information. And I think that's a huge issue with social media, particularly when we're seeing censorship, bias censorship, lack of, regulation, accountability from big tech. So, I mean, it's a big fear that, yes, my following sees what I'm posting, but I don't think they're really the ones that we need to get to. You flip to a different account where, you're retargeted for the boots you buy, you're retargeted for your beliefs. And that's the game of social media. So a lot of people aren't seeing the information. And I think as an influencer or a person with a following, we have to figure out how to reach and get this information to everyone so that they have the ability for themselves to choose and believe based on real facts. And right now we're seeing this effort to create a false moral equivalence between Israel, a democracy, and Hamas, a terrorist organization. And that's just not in balance. And the fact that's being entertained, even perpetuated by leaders, it's disinformation at its worst. I mean, Israel is damned if they fight back and annihilated if they don't. So I think for me and my following are feeling like getting the message across, it's really showing up at rallies, joining with community, creating a presence, pushing our leaders. Mayor de Blasio tweeted out saying we need to push back against anti-Semitism in the street. NYPD is now putting up faces of pro-Palestinian rioters who are causing violence in our streets, a lot of fear here. I know Mati and I were at the rally last week in Times Square, which was a shock to see happen in our city like this. So I think it's hard to see us having impact when everybody is seeing their own feeds, being fed what they want to see, running with that belief. And this year, more than ever, we've seen a call to performative activism. And when we started the show, we were saying everybody feels like they need to get up and speak and say when they're not educated.
Right.
And I mean, I myself am not as educated. I converted to Judaism. I do have that history, but I'm learning, and I'm learning with organizations, and I just think, we've got to get out of our own heads, our own space, our own social media, and look at things objectively. And that's the goal I have. And
Right.
I think we have to keep showing up for it.
That brings up a really interesting point. And I was talking to some friends and the producer here before, how I feel like we have not had conversations with friends at dinners, wherever you go, in the last month that have not involved this topic, that have not been like, did you read this article? Did you sign this petition? Did you hear about this? Did you see this? Like, it has become more of a topic of conversation, especially with maybe a younger crowd, 20s to even 30s, where it's like before we maybe wouldn't have been speaking about this at dinners and parties and at the beach hanging out or whatever it is. And it's become such a topic of discussion, and everyone shares their opinions. And I have a lot of friends that fight back on their DMs and their Instagram comments or whatever it is. Do you see that there's a point in doing that? I want to ask you, Rudy, I know that you have a really big following, and I'm sure you get a lot of pushback on things that you post. Do you respond to everybody that pushes back?
Absolutely. I engage with everyone because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. No one is doing something because they think they're doing the wrong thing. They think that it's doing the right thing, even if it may be the wrong thing. So I think that engaging with them, giving them more of a holistic understanding on the situation, where you can absolutely be pro-Palestinian. You can absolutely criticize certain policies or certain things and being able to fight, but it's not by being against. And I think that we need to step out a little bit from the problem for a second and understand why we even got here in the first place. Let's study another group of people, for example, women or people of color in America. If we go back 70, 80 years ago, they didn't have equal rights in America. What got it that today, 70, 80 years later, there's still a ton of work to do, but we've gotten to a point where our generation, who's been born with this reality, see the idea of people because of their skin color or because of their gender not having equal rights as something ridiculous. There's clearly been a shift in culture with younger generation, and eventually that younger generation growing into political power and changing pop culture and getting people to understand, and eventually they made those changes. But people had to rise up. Black people fought for their rights. Women fought for their rights. Of course, they had allies, but they led their rights in moving forward. And what did the Jewish students do on college campuses and intellectual spaces? They usually shy away. Right now, we have a conflict. Right now, there's on social media. Right now, it's viral. So people are getting involved. But when this dies down, when this settles down, everyone is going to go back to their lives and pretend it's not an issue. And it's just going to get worse in 3-4 years when it comes back up. So it's time for us to be able to narrate our story, us to be able to shift that culture, and especially targeting the younger generation. And even speaking to people that are, the most hateful that you can experience, that you think they're completely against your other side, show them that there's another way to be pro-Palestinian, or those that are pro-Israel and anti-Palestinian. There's another way to be pro-Israel. You shouldn't be anti-either population, because if you're anti-either, you're anti-both. So we need to create new conversation to be able to lead that conversation.
I want to ask Shir your opinion on, do you feel like anti-Zionist is anti-Semitic? Do you feel like that's a valid statement? Do you think that people that believe in that Jews have the right to have, the state of Israel, or don't have the right to have the state of Israel is anti-Semitic? And how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely believe that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic. I mean, to take a step back for a second, I think the scariest thing to me is the global spread of political polarization. This is happening in the US, it's happening all across Europe, and the growth of the extremists on both sides, on both ends of the political spectrum, is very dangerous, because not only are both ends anti-Zionist, but there's a lot of anti-Semitic sentiment behind what they're saying. And it's contributing a lot to the rise of anti-Semitism globally. And it's creating a very difficult environment for Jews to feel comfortable and safe in around the world. And it really feels like at one point that, okay, so now both ends are saying, Israel doesn't have the right to exist, or, free Palestine. And again, right, you have to ask them, what does that mean, free Palestine, to you? Because it could different things. So that's another topic as well. But yeah, it's scary, because I have a lot of friends that reach out to me saying, I do support Israel. I feel like Israel does, I do believe Israel has the right to exist, but I don't know what to respond to people that message me on social media also saying, but what about this? What about Palestine? And that's another thing that I wanted to say. Rudy was saying earlier, we're pushing this narrative of one side against the other when it shouldn't be that. And like he said as well, we're not all educated, and not many people are able to stand up for their political opinion. And that's something that, we really have to help everyone. And I even tell my followers that reach out to me, like, I want to post something, but I'm scared of the response. I say, post what you feel comfortable with. If you get a response you don't know how to answer, I'll help you answer it. And I think that's baby steps I think we should take to help spread, spread information and educate everyone. But yeah, to answer your initial question, I do believe that. I think there's a lot of anti-Semitism behind the anti-Zionist movement. There's been anti-Semitism around the world for thousands of years.
Right.
People are using Israel now as an excuse to now, to redirect their anti-Semitic, I would say. And that's really what I see happening. And yeah, that's just answered your question.
Rudy?
Yeah, so I think there's an additional layer to that. Let's first define the terms, because a lot of people define themselves as anti-Zionist, and they're using the term Zionism very differently. So whenever I'm engaging with someone, I ask them, okay, well, what do you define as Zionism that makes you anti? And they usually say, well, I'm against the occupation, I'm against the conflict, I'm against the suffering of Palestinians. And I was like, okay, well, if that's what Zionism meant, I also would be against it. However, it's not up to you to define what Zionism is. It's up to the Jewish people. Zion comes from Jerusalem. It's Zion in Hebrew. Zionism means the right for the Jewish people to self-determine on their ancestral land. Now, why is that anti-Semitic? Because if you were against the Tibetans' right to return to Tibet, that is a form of being anti-Tibetan. If you're against the Native Americans' rights to their land, the Native Canadian rights to their land, against the Maori's rights to self-determine or to have a relationship to their land, that is a form of being anti those people. If you're against the black people's rights to civil rights, that is a form of being anti those people. There are many layers of anti-Semitism. You can believe, like Hitler, that all Jews should be killed. You can believe that all Jews should be kicked out. You can believe that Jews should have different rights. And you can believe that Jews should not be disempowered and cannot live in their land. And that is a form of being anti our people. So it's like, I like the Jews, but when they're weak and when they're in diaspora, when they're not strong. But all of a sudden, when they're strong and when they're home and when they want the same standard that all other indigenous peoples want, which actually our story represents the most successful indigenous liberation movement that ever existed and empowers other indigenous peoples around the world, then all of a sudden I have a problem with it. So it is anti-Semitic because if you apply the same standard to any other people, you would not do it. You're only applying it to the Jewish people.
Thank you guys so much. I think that, whether you guys are in New York, anywhere in America, anywhere around the world, especially here in Israel, what has happened here in the last 2 weeks, specifically, first time happening so strongly in Tel Aviv, is definitely going to leave a mark on us. We hear the sounds, we hear the sirens, we get triggered. It's very, nerve-wracking and shakes us up and makes us want to influence and educate everyone around us. So I'm really, really, really appreciative of every one of you guys for coming, sharing with your followers, and thank you so much. Obviously, we could have this conversation go on for hours, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have left. Thank you to Moti, Adi, Rudy, Chen, and Shir for joining me, sharing your insight, and for taking part in this essential conversation. And to everyone back home, you can watch the full discussion on our social media later tonight. I'm Emmanuel Kadosh. Stay safe, stay informed, and thank you all for watching.
And that's all for today's Good Week Israel. I'm Aaron Porras. See you next week.